My name's Mawn. We're just doing an interview for Assessment 2 of Educ3025. And this is Peter, the teacher I'm interviewing. She's currently a teacher of Thursday Island.
Hi, my name's Peter. I have about 15 years teaching experience in a primary school setting in rural and remote areas, and I'm currently a member of leadership at the primary school I'm at.
I'm completing my final GTPA assessment. I'm doing technologies in high school setting, but this interview is just to gather some information about data, planning, and how teachers use it to increase and engage students a lot better. So first up, how do you use data to inform your teaching and planning decisions?
Data has become more and more prevalent within my years of teaching. It is something that is mandated a lot of times in schools now. It is used to inform your teaching practices and also to assess students' understanding of the curriculum that we're teaching. We do a lot of formative assessments to gauge where students are at so that we can target the learning to their ability levels. Where I teach, there are a lot of students who have English as an additional language or dialect, so their abilities in relation to English are different. So we need to make sure that we are finding out where they are at and teaching to their ability levels. We do formative assessments and check-ins along the way within each teaching unit to see where the students are at, if we need to adjust our teaching, go back and reteach some subjects, or if students need some more intensive Tier 2 or Tier 3 strategies to support them with where they're at. And then at the end of the unit, obviously, we will collect data in the form of their assessments through their criteria sheets and their rubrics.
Okay, so but then obviously when you're doing that, you're using a bit of quantitative and a bit of qualitative data. You probably find a lot of qualitative data comes out of kids while you're observing them, and you can see where they're at, especially with that English as a second language. Or
so qualitative data I find is really important because it helps us to build relationships. So you're collecting that data every day because it might not give you lots of figures and things like that, but it does inform your practice as to how the students engage with you, how the students are engaging in the classroom. You might be collecting a little bit of data on how a student is each morning and that they might require a little bit more support to settle in class, or if they might need breakfast or those sorts of things. So that sort of quality information and quality data collection is really important for you to make sure that you're supporting your students and building relationships and engaging them. And then the quantitative is, if we did have a student who we were monitoring for different behaviours and trying to find out what the function of their behaviour was, we can collect data about when those behaviour occurrences are occurring, if it's maths, if it's English, if it's the morning, if it's the afternoon, to find out why things are happening, to try and then support that student. And then obviously when we're thinking about the curriculum, obviously the A to E marking scale, or the very high to lower marking scale, can help us inform our practices. If the formative assessments, and then we again completing those assessments at the end, you can see the growth in those students, obviously, in their curriculum areas as well.
so it's giving you a feedback on your teaching methods essentially as well.
It does give me feedback on the teaching methods.
And strategies.
Some teachers
using.
might not take it that way.
Yep.
They might take it that the student's just not understanding the content, but a reflective teacher would look at it and say, okay, what do I need to change to potentially support these students to do better? And I think we do a lot of that data collection along the way to help us to understand how we need to change things.
It's an individually informal way of doing it. As a teacher yourself, you're constantly engaging in different teaching strategies, and this obviously is important, and this is how you incorporate different teaching strategies as you're doing that with the students. You can identify what their needs are individually, potentially, or as a class, a collective, because obviously it's all very, not necessarily every class is the same. It's all.
No, it's very much related to your context. I think that teachers probably don't realise, but the number of decisions that we make on data every day, but it's not necessarily formalised data. It's at that point in time you're going, well, he can't, he's not using contractions yet, or neither's that person. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to do a small group session with those students to try and get them to understand the content. There's lots of little small collections of data that we're making all the time to inform our practice.
Yeah, okay. And then obviously in that, how do you choose then your assessment tools? You use obviously you're saying summative and formative. Formative at the start, like you're using different quizzes to develop what their setting is and where they're at each individually, and what sort of goals you're setting for them. But then if you identify one area that needs more work, then you can do that as a whole, or break kids off into different groups, or...
Absolutely.
Yep, so it's a lot more selective.
Lots of little, it doesn't even have to look like an assessment, like it doesn't have to be a formal assessment. It can just be a check-in, check-out at the end of the session. They have to all answer a question, and you can just gauge from there if you need to continue teaching or revise, or if everybody's got it, we can move on to the next thing.
Yep, okay. So then when this comes down to it, then you're looking at the quality of the work and engaging in moderation with the students' outcomes, their learning outcomes, or their assessment to the criteria?
Yeah, moderation is very important, I think, as a teacher. Being in rural, and then even more so noticeable in remote settings. I'm in currently a school that's only got one year level, one class per year level, and it can be hard for teachers to moderate against because they haven't got any other student work, any other teaching samples to moderate. So then we need to use each other. You know, the 3-4 teachers will moderate together, the 5-6 teachers will moderate together, because that then helps you go outside of your little bubble of your school to make sure that you are still teaching and assessing against the Australian curriculum. We sometimes do online sessions within the wider region, but I find that that sometimes lacks a little bit of purpose, because we don't really fully understand the assessment. And I think as teachers and schools are still learning and understanding how to actually teach and assess against the curriculum correctly, but those moderation processes help us to reflect, although a lot of teachers don't like to do that because it feels like our work is being looked at with over a fine-tooth comb, but it is a good way of ensuring that you are ticking all of the boxes in regards to the assessment.
It formalises the assessment tool essentially by removing a bit of the personal, because you've developed relationships with these kids and you see what they can do every day,
and you might
having
be
that
more
assessment.
Yeah, you might feel like you're a little more lenient because they're
your
kids. But we do need to make sure that we are teaching against the Australian curriculum. If we're trying to provide world-class education, that we're saying that a student in Thursday Island has the same access to education as a student in Sydney, and they should be taught and assessed against the same level. We obviously have our other larger assessment tools that we use to gather data. Some schools rely on them more heavily than others. For example, we've got PAT M, which is PAT Maths, PAT R, which is reading. We have formalised reading assessments that we do, and then you've obviously got your NAPLAN testing. Obviously, depending on the context, depending on the school, your NAPLAN data can inform a lot of your progress. We sort of look at it as a more generalised tool because we know that English as an additional language definitely affects students' ability to engage with the NAPLAN testing and computers.
Exposure of the students, because we're coming from a small community, obviously, so there's the exposure to the bigger picture items. Makes it a lot more.
So some of the questions within the NAPLAN testing, students wouldn't even understand.
No.
If they're talking about an elevator or an escalator, some of the students would never have seen that in their life, so therefore they're already,
They're at a disadvantage in that respect for the context of where they are.
Yeah.
If you're asking them about their local knowledge of what they see, a lot of boats and stuff, it's a bit more.
You can look at it as a general cohort as well, so that sort of data is helpful, and we can monitor growth over time.
Yep.
So for the Year 5 test and the Year 7 test, or the Year 3 and Year 5, we can see their growth over time.
Yep.
But we find that the moderation processes and the assessments and the formative assessments over time, checking that they're small amounts of growth,
Yep.
Is still progress.
And that's where the measure of impact on the students of your teaching itself. The formative gives you a good base level, and it gives you a check-in even if you do one every day, a quick check on the review of what you did the day before. Or that's a very quick measure of your teaching, not necessarily as how the students are getting better or whatever, if you don't want to look at it like that, but how your practices are helping them, and if they're engaging and taking the information in.
And something that we need to remember, I think, in teaching is that just because we think we're doing a good job teaching the content doesn't mean that the students are going to understand it that way. So then you can incorporate like the universal design for learning, that students don't all learn the same way. Students all don't learn from reading something. We need to incorporate visuals, we need to incorporate hands-on tools. We might need to do all three for students to really understand the concept and revise over them. So it's a way for you to have to reflect upon your teaching practices and change things to suit your context.
And then that obviously is then just a constant loop anyway, because that then feedback goes back into your planning, which then goes into your lessons, and then obviously you're reviewing your own lessons and seeing, because as I've seen in my experience with placements, you have a bar for yourself that you're trying to hit, but you're never going to hit it because you're already setting it too high for yourself. That's what I feel. And then adapting and looking at the lesson and going, oh, what have I done wrong? Because you've obviously done a lot of things. You could think, maybe I should have done this at this point, this at this point.
Yeah.
And then that feedback from your mentor teacher or other people can then loop back, and then you go into your planning stage again and just continually cycle through it.
Yeah,
Being adaptable obviously is very important.
We can all think that we have a really great lesson and it can fall in a heap.
Yep.
So then that's just a learning curve, and we come back again tomorrow and we try something
start again.
different.
Yeah. And the planning obviously is, if you've planned it and you understand the content being some of the professional requirements for teaching, if you have that base level and you're going in at least organised, if it all falls apart, you just have to be able to change, adapt,
Absolutely.
change strategies,
Yeah.
change how the kids, and because the kids might have had an awesome lesson the day before teaching nearly the same content,
Yeah.
that day it could be a Thursday, the moon could be different, something's different, and it changes how they are in class or what's happened after lunch. Having them after lunch I found was a big one.
Yeah.
So you have to change your strategies and change what you're doing with the kids to adapt to what their requirements are.
Absolutely.
So maybe not sitting at a desk after they've been at lunch all day, they're already still hyped up, so you might do different strategies in that, not having them sit at their desk writing or, okay. Well, I thank you very much for your interview, and hope you enjoy the rest of your teaching, and I'll hopefully be getting into it in the next few years.
Thank you. Good luck.